First story. OP's girlfriend uninvited him to her work party, slept with a bartender, took cheerful pics with him, and hid them for over a month. Now she claims she was sawed and doesn't remember anything but refuses to press SAW charges or expose him at his work. This has turned into a wall of text, so I thank anyone who reads. It's probably too much detail, but it's been therapeutic to write it all out. Background. I, 24M, have been going out with my girlfriend 22F for just over 3 years. We do not live together. We were both living at our parents' houses while attending university. But I recently graduated and now have my own place with a roommate. She still lives with her mom, but we have had a few discussions about moving in together. I work full-time at an office job, and she is in class with a part-time restaurant job on the side. She started this job at the beginning of November and was hired by one of her friends. She told me it was annoying that several of the male staff members constantly flirted with her and made inappropriate jokes despite her being in a relationship. This includes the restaurant's bartender 31M. In late November, only a couple weeks after she started, the staff had their annual Christmas party at the restaurant. It was on a Monday night since the restaurant is closed Tuesday mornings. Later that week, my girlfriend was also supposed to be house-sitting dog-sitting for a friend. She had to go feed the dog every day and was allowed to stay overnight if she wanted starting Tuesday. We were talking about how we both thought it was hot to have SX in someone else's house and planned to have a few wild nights when we got the chance. My side of the story. I stayed home the night of the party. I was told it was staff only, no significant others, and I had work in the morning, so I had no problem staying in. I dropped my girlfriend off, and I was texting her throughout the night. At around 11, I told her I was going to sleep and said goodnight. I was still up another hour or so, but based on her texts, she was quite drunk, and it was frustrating having a regular conversation, so I didn't want to text anymore. I sent her a message the next morning and didn't hear back until around 2 p.m. when she informed me she was extremely hungover and slept half the day. Even though her mom's house was just around the corner from the restaurant, she said she instead decided to go to the dog-sitting house a day early since it was on the way to the bar that some people headed to after the party. Apparently the homeowners left earlier Monday night. We hung out later that night, and she showed me photos of the party. I saw most people brought their significant others, and I was kind of insulted. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't think we were supposed to be invited, and that I shouldn't have cared since I had work the next day anyway. We had a minor disagreement, but nothing serious. The next couple days were normal. We were happy, and Thursday night, I suggested we go over the dog-sitting house together. She started acting weird and said she didn't want to do that anymore, but we could hang out at my place. We did, watched some TV, and I tried to initiate sex. She refused and said I was being too pushy and went home. I didn't think I did anything wrong, and I was frustrated. The next 2 weeks or so were more of the same. No sex, which led to frustration and silly arguments over little things. She started exams in mid-late December, and stress was through the roof. Finally, after she finished exams, we went out to a party, went home together, and had sex. It had been probably 3 weeks, and previously we were having sex 5 times a week. Over the Christmas break, we resumed having lots of sex, but things still didn't feel right. There were lots of arguments. We both returned to work school, and it seemed like every day there was some new disagreement. And now today, we were fighting about something stupid, whether or not her friend calling me Garfield should be insulting, and trying to resolve it. I made an offhand comment about how these little fights shouldn't bother me so much. It's not like she cheated on me. And then she broke down. She started sobbing and saying that she made a huge mistake at the Christmas party. She said she couldn't bear to tell me and wanted to kill herself. Her side of the story. After the crying stopped, I made her tell me what happened. I was pretty pissed off and yelling because she basically told me she cheated on me a month and a half ago and tried to hide it. This is her side. A lot of it is pieced together from her messages and what her coworkers told her, since she has no little memory of the night. The party was open bar, and she and her friend were hanging out at the bar most of the night. The bartender was another employee who had volunteered to take the night off from drinking to serve everyone else. Partway through the night, he started giving her drinks that she wasn't even asking for. She was having a good time and accepted them. Eventually, she got blackout drunk, still pretty early in the night too. She doesn't remember me texting her goodnight, which was only around 11 p.m. At midnight, she texted the dog-sitting people, asking if she could go over that night. There was no answer, of course, since they were on an international flight somewhere. Everyone kept drinking until about 12:30 a.m. Around 1 a.m., The bartender drove a group of people from the party to a bar. He returned to the party to drive the last carload of people to the bar. Everyone else had made their way home by this point. He dropped everyone at the bar except my girlfriend. He told the others he would drive her home, but together they then went back to the dog-sitting house. I don't know the exact details of what happened next, but around 3 a.m, she sent a photo to their work group chat. It includes her, the bartender, and the dog in a bed. You could only see from their shoulders up, but they were obviously shirtless. She included a message that said, "I hope everyone is having a good time. I know we are." She insists she has zero recollection of this happening. She woke up Tuesday lunchtime and was surprised she wasn't in her own bed. The bartender wasn't there when she got up, and there was no sign of him. She said she assumed she must have decided to go out to the bar after, which is why she asked to stay at the dog-sitting house instead of her own. Apparently, she didn't find out what happened until Thursday when she was talking to her friend. She was shown the picture she sent, which was since buried in the group chat. She still insists she has no memory of anything and freaked out and didn't know what to do. That's why she refused to go to that house with me, and why things suddenly got so weird between us. She says she wanted to deny to herself that it happened and didn't want to tell me. After finding out the truth today, there has been lots of yelling and crying, and I'm currently home by myself. My thoughts. First of all, I do believe she was taken advantage of. She was blackout drunk, and the bartender was sober and significantly older. Her coworkers all confirmed that the bartender told everyone he was dropping her at home, and also that he was feeding her free drinks all night. I also believe she didn't remember it happening at first, because there was a definite mood change on Thursday, which lines up with when she said she found out. However, I can't help but feel like she was willing, even if she was drunk. I'm hurt, and it feels like I was cheated on. It's not like the bartender took her home against her will and assaulted her. She figured out the logistics of finding a place to go with him and looked extremely happy in the photo. Why it still feels like cheating. I was told I wasn't invited to the party when everyone else brought their so's. She had access to the dog-sitting house a day earlier than I thought. She had brought the key to the dog-sitting house to her work party, even though it was right next to her mom's house. The bartender is a guy who had openly flirted with her for weeks. She didn't tell me what happened for over a month and had planned on hiding it forever. In anger, I told her that if this wasn't cheating, then she must have been sawed. And that if we don't press charges, then at the very least we need to ensure the bartender loses his job. She cried again and refused to do either. Since she can't remember the night, she isn't willing to report him for anything and can't confirm she didn't want it. What do you guys think? I'm an emotional mess right now and struggling to be logical. Do I need to put emotion behind me and support her as a victim? Or is she a cheater? Things were great before this, and I had hoped to spend my life with this girl. Update 1. I spoke to her again today and said that there were too many coincidences that make this seem like she planned it out. I told her I needed a bit of time to figure this out, but I didn't think I would be able to move past it. I know drawing this out is probably not the best way to handle anything, but all logic goes out the window when you're the one involved in a mess like this. However, there are still a few updates worth mentioning. We looked at the photo again, and it really looks like the bartender took the photo. There were only 2 coherent messages she sent after I said goodnight. One to the homeowners and one along with a photo in the group chat. She had a few other messages to a non-work friend during this time that are complete nonsense. She showed me an earlier message where her friend said the party was for staff only. She insisted she had never messaged the bartender except within the work group chat. She showed me unaccepted Facebook and Snapchat invites from him and said she didn't even have his number. She was willing to let me use a recovery tool to prove they had never messaged, but I didn't go through with it. She had the key on her keychain since she picked it up from the homeowners like a week in advance. She is so adamant about this that she was checking photos she took of her odometer hitting 100K to see if her keys were visible, but no proof. She said she would be willing to report the bartender to work for SOTS, but was still uneasy about pressing charges. She still went through with it and hid it from me. So even if her story is completely true somehow, I'm not sure if I can move past it. Update. I have decided to side with my girlfriend and support her as we figure this out. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine, and I'm not promising that we'll make it through this. Honestly, I have a feeling we probably won't. But we've been together for 3 years, and I believe her about what happened. I think she is a victim, even if she didn't handle everything correctly that night. I'm going to support her and try to figure out the full story. I've read every comment in here. I was responding to many with information in these updates, but there are far too many to reply to. Most of the top comments were posted early and are quick to tell me to break up. If you read the rest, they are probably split 60-40 about whether she set it all up or if she was assaulted. To everyone saying that she should break up with me for how I have handled this so far, please try to understand how emotional this ordeal has been for both of us. She came to me saying she made a mistake and that it was her fault, and she hid it for over a month. I only learned all of this yesterday, and I freaked out. Second story. OP married the girl he bullied all her life to the point of committing self-harm, believing she started the rumors that he sawed his baby sister, which she wasn't. Now they are expecting a baby. Sorry in advance. English is not my first language. I will try to explain as best as I can. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I have been wanting to tell someone about this, but I am unable to talk with anyone because everyone in my circle feels around the same way as I do. I met my wife when we were kids. Back then, I remember thinking she was a weird kid. Knowing what I know now, of course she seemed weird. She has autism. We met because we attended the same school, and my dad knew her dad. She was always alone. She was very quiet, and teachers seemed to like picking on her. They would tell her to space out in front of everyone. This gave me the idea it was okay to pick on her. But most of the time she seemed genuinely confused about everything going on. So eventually I just left her alone. She was always very curious, though, and very vocal about having a crush on me too. Back then, I have to admit I found her very cute. Something about her always confused state made me want to both make fun of her and be close to her at the same time. We were 7 back then before anyone told me I was toxic. Back then, teachers would tell us to stay away from her because she was weird. But then they would tell her parents she was antisocial. Eventually, she just stopped trying and would sit recesses out in the tables. She got into drawing, and I would sit with her during recess. Watching her draw, she was already a weeb back then. Most of her drawings were of Pikachu and of Inuyasha, with the occasional Naruto thrown in there. She eventually got into video games too, and would sprinkle some of them in. I didn't like them back then, but she was so excited about them, and I liked seeing her excited. So I asked my parents for games she was playing, and we would talk about them in recess. She learned how to knit too, and I would watch her do it for as long as she didn't get too stressed about it. Eventually, a new girl joined the school. She was mean to my wife, but she seemed to think it was funny. She would laugh about it too. Back then, I thought that meant it was okay, so I started picking on her too. We had an activity in which we would bring sentimental objects to school on Fridays. She brought her plushies always. Teachers would make fun of her for bringing boyish things. To this day, I always get her plushies for dates and special occasions. The way she smiles every time is so lovely. Eventually, we had to move schools around middle school time. 3 of us moved to the same school. My wife, that girl, and I. Once again, she was always parted off. She sat out the recess, and people noticed. This time I couldn't sit with her because people were isolating me too. So I just left her alone. She never seemed to mind being alone anyway. Then a rumor started to circulate that I was molesting my baby sister. I had broken my glasses, and I had them taped by the middle. Somehow that meant my baby sister broke them trying to defend herself. I was very angry, and everyone started to say that my wife had said it. Back then, it made sense. She was angry I left her alone, so she made it up. This rumor caused my parents to be called and caused issues at home. I was angry with her, so I started to bully her. It started small. I would mock her name. She has a male-sounding name. Call her ugly, mock her hair. I would tell everyone what she said, and this caused the whole grade and eventually the whole school to isolate her. Teachers included. I made kids promise they wouldn't talk to her. If anyone new came into the school, I'd tell them so they'd avoid her. And if they still tried, I would bully them until they left her alone. She asked me multiple times why I was doing this. Asked me why I hated her now. I never responded because I thought she was mocking me. She was always a chubby girl. She lost a lot of weight. She cut her hair and stopped talking again. My wife has this habit of going silent from time to time. Sometimes it's a few hours. Other times it's days. The longest it's happened is a few months. It kept on a few years where I didn't have to bully her anymore. Everyone else was doing it for me. I don't know what happened when, but she started to get beaten at one point. And then she stopped attending school for a few weeks. We got a visit from the director. She had attempted self-harm and was thankfully unsuccessful. She chewed us a new hole. When she returned, she was back to being silent. We tried to apologize and include her in class activities, but she always left. If we sat on her table at lunch, she would always go and sit somewhere else. She didn't change schools. She told me recently it was because she wanted us to see what we had done to her. I can't blame her at all. During 9th grade, she started to talk again. She started to draw again. She began to talk with other people. But it was never with us. Never know me. I asked her if we could talk multiple times, and while she always accepted, she never turned up. Eventually, I just stopped asking. I walked home with her and made sure she was okay before going home myself. She was already talking and eating lunch with us. She'd make jokes about her killing herself so many times, but they always fell dry. During senior year, she fell again. She started to harm herself. She left before I could pack up and started to walk home alone. I ended up doing what I did as a kid again. I ended up watching so much anime with her. It is silly. Her favorite character is Rin Okimura, if that rings any bells for anyone. I attended a few Comic Cons with her. I even made cosplay with her. She always looked so happy. For prom, I asked her out, but she didn't attend. She skipped her own prom. I attended because of my parents, but after a few hours I left. I called her to see a movie, but she said she was busy. My wife sleeps a lot too. She works odd jobs. She has a parody for comics she makes, which gives her enough money to have no company job. So I usually find her asleep when I come back from work. She sleeps at odd hours too. Just sleeps a lot. Now that she's pregnant, she sleeps even more. She's chipper and weird still whenever we go out. But she's almost always asleep when I come back from work. If she's with her back to the door, I hug her from behind and just stay there until she wakes up. She sleeps like a log. She didn't attend college. She already had that Instagram comic page, and it's only grown since then. She's taken language courses, though. She's learning Japanese now, and I have never seen her so happy yet so frustrated at the same time. Always complaining about the 3 alphabets. My wife and I lost contact during these times, and I found her again at a high school meetup. She knocked the air out of me. She seemed way more serious of herself, but she was still very quiet. We exchanged numbers, and 5 years later we got married. Now we are expecting our first baby together. Our son moves a lot. He's a very feisty baby. He loves her voice too. I love her voice too. I studied psychology, and I noticed stuff in her. So I asked one of my professors about it, and he asked to see her. My wife got referred to a psychiatrist, and she was diagnosed with autism. It all made sense and made it even worse. I bullied an autistic girl. She was genuinely confused about what was happening. I never apologized for what I did. In the end, I found out she was not even the one who said the rumor. All those years I spent hating her for a lie that she hadn't even said. I am planning to take her on a date to apologize, maybe take her to see that new anime movie about the door, and then to dinner to then apologize. Or maybe a home date would be better with a movie her favorite movie is a silent voice. So I'm thinking that some food, maybe some cuddling and apologies. Or maybe some video games. She's been into Scarlet and Violet lately. She says she will leave me for Professor Turo any day. I don't blame her. He's a very good-looking guy. I thought of getting her a Zelda cake too, but I am still planning. I wanted to make her a prom too, since she didn't attend hers. She's pregnant, yes, but she's never looked more beautiful. I have asked my friends, and they said they'd help in any way. I need some help and just some advice. Just some ranting too. I'm going to post in relationship advice too. But for now, I just needed to get this off of my chest. Update. Thank you all so much for the comments. I ended up apologizing after a binge watch of some of the Pokemon movies. Just an indoor date with us two. Our son who still is not out and our bunnies. We talked about what happened so many years ago. She said that she didn't hold resentment toward me because, in her eyes, I am also a victim of the whole rumor. I strongly disagree with her on that one, but she wouldn't budge. She said she doesn't care what happened between her and me because we were kids, but that she is happy that I wanted to apologize. We talked into the early morning hours, and it felt very good. We both cried, but it was a good type. I used the sappy Pikachu phrase one of the comments suggested, and it made her laugh for a few minutes. Every time I look at her, I feel way more in love than before. I don't want to stop looking at her like this. We recently finished our son's nursery, and as one of you suggested, I'll let her pick both names. It took some convincing to get her to agree, but we both are happy about the names she chose. They are very sentimental to us both, I would say it. but one of our mutuals found the post, and we don't want to spoil the name. Thank you so much for the advice. Third story. I hugged a teenage girl, congratulating her on her graduation at my nephew's graduation party, and she called the cops on me, falsely accusing me of saying her after 6 months of the incident. This is going to be long, but I'll just type it all out. I need to have the narrative clear in my mind for future reference. But it occurs to me that others may benefit from hearing this, and perhaps some commentary around it. A couple of cops showed up at my door last night and wanted to talk to me. I wasn't being arrested. They just wanted to investigate a complaint. A 17-year-old at the time girl claiming I'd assaulted her. Some background. I'm an average 50-year-old white guy with a wife and 2 kids. I've never in my life done anything that would even remotely fall into this category, going back as long as I can remember. On the contrary, I've always been taught and have been respectful and, okay, yada yada, fill in the blanks. I'm sure every criminal claims to be a nice guy too, so let's not waste time. I just mention I've never in my life ever been accused of anything of the sort, and my first impulse was to tell these cops they must have the wrong person. So they shared her name, and I drew a complete blank. I've never heard that name, fake. Who is she? When did this happen? What happened? It happened on a certain day in June of this year at a big hotel downtown. Okay, now I'm sure they have the wrong guy. But let's explore this. I've been at that hotel a few times for gala events or whatever. I don't recall ever spending a night there. Well, it turns out it was my nephew's graduation party. My nephew goes to a boarding school, and since his family is far away, my wife and I filled in as his family at this big grade 12 grad party. I do remember that. But who's this girl? Well, it turns out it was her graduation date. I'd never met her before, wouldn't have remembered her name, wouldn't recognize her if I saw her, and frankly, don't even recall interacting with her. So what is this actually all about? Well, say the cops. You tell us. What's your recollection of that evening with respect to this girl? Okay, it's very straightforward. Like I said, we'd never met. When my wife and I got there, my nephew and this girl were already there. We went up to them to say hi. My wife hugged the nephew. My wife hugged this girl. I hugged the nephew. I hugged the girl. There was some idle small talk. They went off to see some friends. I went off to find some other parents I knew. Eventually, we sat down for dinner. I did not sit next to or across from this girl. She sat elsewhere. I didn't speak a word to her. At some point, she and the nephew got up and, as it turns out, left. Never saw them again that night. And never saw or heard from or about that girl ever again. Till yesterday. And that's my story. And I'm sticking to it. And it's the truth. So unless she's claiming that hug was a saw, I sincerely don't know what you're talking about. And yeah, as it turns out, that's exactly it. She didn't like the hug. Apparently she's not a hugger. So 6 months after I assaulted her by hugging her hello, she called the cops. Among the many questions I had for the cops, I asked them, why isn't my wife also being investigated? Didn't she do the exact same thing? The investigators are not unreasonable, and I understand their job is to investigate complaints. And after speaking to me and my wife separately, they left, saying, we will not be recommending charges, and you likely won't hear anything further regarding this matter. Thank you for your time. So, good. Okay. Case closed, to whatever extent it was ever open. I called my nephew right away and dragged him out of his sleep. 3 time zones ahead, now studying at an East Coast university. Sorry, dude, but I need to know what's up. Yeah, she doesn't like hugs. She did mention it that night, but not really in anger, just an FYI. My nephew hadn't spoken to her in a while, but she oddly contacted him recently, asking for our wife and I full names and street address. Nephew oddly assumed for Christmas card. But whatever, he gave her the info. They had dated a few more times after that, but then he took off and she stayed in town, and while they didn't part on best terms, it was nothing for which she'd be seeking revenge or whatever. He was puzzled and upset. And so am I. It looks like this will just go away, but I have to wonder what would have happened if these cops had shown up at my work. And what if someone overheard xually blah 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 being discussed with me? And or what if I coached my 12-year-old daughter's softball team, and these cops went on a rampage asking other parents if I'd ever hugged their little girls? Well, my daughter doesn't play softball, and I've never coached any team, but my train of thought took me to how effing devastating this could have been, and it's making me really angry. As per above somewhere, I am respectful of women and applaud heartily the openness with which our society finds itself these days, where women are feeling more empowered than ever to step up and say their piece. And every single one of them should be heard when there's a story that needs to be heard. But this, In this climate of openness, something like this could destroy a life. Okay, I get it. You don't like hugs. Tell people that. Say something beforehand. And don't overreact. And geez, do those words really have the clout they should? That they used to? Unwanted hug. Dragged into the bushes and forcibly roped. Cat called from across the street. I'll admit I've always felt a sort of, where there's smoke, there's fire attitude toward accusers and their accusers. Certainly in cases where multiple women claim multiple transgressions against a specific person. But that is a far cry from one accusation against someone with zero history. And I suppose the cops get that. Not just that the crime wasn't very heinous after all, but given the complete lack of pattern behavior, and how clearly there was no untoward intent, they're seeing it for what it is, basically nothing. I guess if I'm in the wrong here, I'll hear about it. Edit. Well, there's a lot to respond to. A few questions have come up multiple times, so I'll just answer them here. And certainly, one thing that came up a lot was, don't talk to the police without a lawyer. I've never actually spoken to cops about anything, except getting speeding tickets or neighborhood break-ins. I would have thought when you've actually done nothing wrong, it'd be okay to talk candidly. And as someone pointed out, lawyering up almost certainly looks guilty and is likely to lead to more questioning and whatever else. So, I recognize the advice, but part of me wants to disagree when you've actually done nothing wrong. The issue with this is that if it proceeds any further, then people will hear about it, and then it's all over for me. The only chance of it going away quietly is playing along. Was I wrong with that assumption? And that wasn't even my thinking. Perhaps I'm just naive and stupid. I really don't know. The hug was a lame one. In hindsight, I don't think she really hugged me back. She didn't take a step back or say anything. And it was little more than a quick 1.5 arm squeeze. Certainly no groping or whatever else. If this goes away quietly, which I expect it will, I have no intention of suing her or counter-claiming or whatever. Ultimately, at least for now, there are no damages to speak of, and instigating something would only draw attention to it. I just want it to go away. A few people have indeed accused me of violating her space. You know what? I grew up in a time where there was nothing wrong with a hug. It's that simple. I realize times have obviously changed, and the goalposts keep moving. I guess I can't reasonably claim I didn't know it wasn't okay to hug someone, especially as it was the fourth hug out of 4. She didn't say a word to anyone about anything while that was going on. And not a word to me either. But yes, unfortunately, lessons learned. Don't worry, it won't happen again. And friends and their kids who are used to hugs from me know more of that. I'd rather be known as cold and unfriendly than as xually deviant. I am not going to ask for consent before hugging anyone. That feels ridiculous. No more hugs. Very easy. As has been mentioned, I have to think she hooked up with some new friends who explained to her. Whether she felt it or not, she's been victimized and should pursue it. That part of it is scary in this day and age. Because there are people with some hardcore agendas who will find every opportunity to implement them. The thought of, yeah, he didn't really do anything so wrong, but make him defend himself with something like this, it's frightening. And thank you for the goal, kind stranger. Your message really resonated with me. TLDR. Hugged a 17-year-old girl at my nephew's graduation. 6 months later, she calls the cops, claiming assault. Cops investigate and find I did nothing wrong. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.